Hey everybody, welcome to episode 13. In today's episode I'm going to cover some of the art books that I had in the 80s, which kind of started my whole art career, or my art, whatever, my lifelong art drawing comic books thing. Um, First of all, I just wanted to point out that I do comic books professionally. I work as a freelancer. I work for a few different clients. I also produce my own, essentially, webcomic that I monetize on Patreon, and I serialize it there. However, I do adult comics, and because of YouTube, I don't want to put any of my artwork up on YouTube for that reason. I don't want it to get pulled down. I will eventually figure out a way to kind of bridge these two platforms together as far as my stuff that I'm doing here on YouTube and then my other stuff. So people who are of interest can go check that out. People who have no interest in that don't have to check it out, and they don't have to be kind of bombarded with me trying to pitch it all the time. So give me some time. If you have any, just direct message me if you want a link, or you're interested, or you want me to explain. Just direct message. Just send me a comment, or you can even email me. My email is there in the business contacts on this channel. But if you have questions about that, come to me direct, and I'll talk to you about it. If not, I'm going to try to keep them separated from this from this YouTube channel. However, a lot of the stuff that I talk about pertains to that stuff because it's comic book oriented and comic characters, that type of thing. But let's get off with this episode. So people have asked me in all the time, what are good books to use to learn to draw? The first question is, there are no good books to learn how to draw. You just have to draw. I think a lot of people, when they ask you questions, how did you do this, or how do I do this, and they're seeking like a class, a method, a technique. I think most people want you to give them a magic answer, and there are no magic answers. So I can only talk about what inspired me and what helped me along. But everybody's different. Everybody learns differently. Everybody develops their own style, their unique voice. Everything is done completely differently. There are a few certain things that are key that you should know, or at least be aware of, and that's what will be in these books that I'm going to discuss. I'm going to do the first one, the main one today, and I'll mention the second one in another separate video, because I don't want to get too in depth. I want to get more in depth on each book instead of just glossing over them, because they're pretty important books to me. The first one, of course, first one is, people might have seen it, How to Draw Comics the Marvel Way. It was published, it's written by Stan Lee, which means it has the Stan Lee talk in it, but that's okay. I can live with that. And it's also co-written by John Buscema, one of my favorite comic book artists of all time, and he pretty much provides most of the visuals, although there are visuals from people like Jack Kirby, John Byrne, John Romita Sr. This was published by Simon & Schuster and Fireside Books. 1978 is the original copyright on it. This is probably I don't know, what does it say? This is way down the line. This is definitely not a first printing. This is not my original book that I had either. I've owned this book about 4 times in my life. The original one got trashed. Second one probably got traded away. Third one, I don't know what happened to it. That's like mid-90s. This is the fourth one that I've owned. I actually bought it, and they also have a spiral bound, which would have been great. Because it'd be easier to lay out, because you'll reference stuff, or you'll want to keep the book open while you're doing other things, even if you're just taking notes. But I didn't get the spiral bound. In lieu of that, I have a PDF version of it, actually it's a CBR version of it, which is just scans of the pages compiled into a CBR made through WinZip. And I use that. And if you needed a page to reference or something you need to have out, you can always just print them out. So if you get the book, just scan the pages. I mean, it's pretty easy. They're black and white, and they got a pretty good margin on it, so you should be able to get them on your scanner pretty well. I touch things up when I scan things in with Clip Paint Pro just to make perfect pages, because I'm used to making comic book pages. Yeah, it's a great book. Some people hate it, and I can totally understand why they hate it. I have kind of a love-hate relationship with it. I love the book. It's always been my Bible. Like, again, this style, the Marvel way, this house style, is my absolute favorite way of these characters were made. And I would just say just characters in general. I love this type of artwork. I really don't like modern comics. I really don't like them. Some of them are okay, and I do have my favorites of those. However, anything after 1989, I really kind of just turn my nose up against. Like, I really don't like computer color, even though I work 100% digitally now. I'll get to that. But I don't like the use of the way people use computer color. I'm not against the computer color per se. Like, I like how I use the computer color, and a few other people, but I think people overuse it to death. To me, it's just a tool. I'm not the best colorist either. I mean, I can lay down flats, which is essentially what basic comics were, with a few embellishes, and that's pretty much all I do. I just embellish flats with just a little bit of pizzazz, just to kind of give it my style. But there are other things that have to do with color that you should know. It's not going to teach you it in this book. You probably have to look for a specific book on that. I've learned it through college, and I've learned it through just basic reading and studying things for years. So I kind of know about color theory, which is what I'm talking about. But yeah, so we're going to talk about this book, and I'm going to flip through the PDFs. So I'll split the screen up again. I find that's been the easiest way to do this. Just before I get going, I will cover this book in another video. This is my other book that I had, and this again is not my original copy. This is actually a very good copy of it, and my original copy I bought at a bookstore, so it was pretty good, but I ended up, dinging it up a lot. But this is a great copy of it. I'm in the process of rereading it again. I've read it probably 5 or 6 times. I always find something new, and I'll get to that with this, because this is like a Pandora's box, and this can be too. But yeah, comic strips, How to Draw and Sell Comic Strips for Newspapers and Comic Books by Alan McKenzie. And this one is copyright 1987. That's when I got this. This was brand new when I got it. It was only 2 years after The Dark Knight was released. Return of the Dark Knight by Frank Miller, which they don't even reference in this. They do reference The Watchmen a couple of times, but most of the references in this book are pretty much Bronze Age references, with the exception of a few Silver Age and Golden Age references. And they do reference a lot of comic strips, which I didn't really... I read them in the book, and I just kind of took them for a grain of salt. I didn't know exactly what they were. I've since learned about some of those comic strips. But the only other thing about this exact time... This is when I started to get serious. Well, for the most part. I tried to really study the craft. And this is a great book. It gives you a lot of stuff that this doesn't, because this doesn't give you a lot of the nuts and bolts, and I believe that this book is pretty good. It's not super extensive, it's only like 130 pages long, but this is a great book too. I'll put up the camera. I don't have a PDF of this, so when we do get to this, I'm probably going to have to do it. I'll either have to scan some pages in that I know that I'm talking about and put those up. I guess I could make a PDF out of it as well, but the margins are okay. I could probably get a pretty good PDF pull off of this. Or CBR. I find making CBR files easier. They're easier to break up too. But let's get into this guy here. So I'm going to switch over to the other screen. That's a nice 10-minute long intro. Again, here's the book. That's in CBR. I can't remember what the name of my comic... I'll tell you before I go. I use a comic viewer to use to view my PDF or my CBRs. It'll also show PDFs as well. And I use it. I also use this on my tablet. I transfer a lot of stuff to my tablet, so I have it, handheld. I can take it on the fly and read stuff. It's how I dump a lot of comics onto it too. But let's see here. How's it being goofy? There we go. Okay, there we go. Hello, I'm in the little box. So, okay, How to Draw Comics the Marvel Way by Stan Lee and John Buscema. The first thing you'll notice, probably, well, let's just go through the contents here. So they talk about tools of the trade, which are all traditional tools. I've since 10 years ago have abandoned all traditional medium. I'm 100% digital now. And you got secrets, form an object that look real, blah blah blah. So Buscema really goes into foreshortening and perspective, and he's a very good draftsman. So a lot of his stuff is drafting related. He talks about the figure, which he's a master at that. Let's draw the figure. You got, the name of the game is action. There's the big thing about this book is, Stan Lee it's the Marvel way. As my one friend pointed out, it's just the comic way is what it is. It doesn't really specifically mean Marvel. I mean, Marvel and DC look different, but they go hand in hand with each other. That this isn't specifically just the Marvel way. So don't let that kind of, like, oh, I don't like Marvel, I'm not going to draw it. No, it pertains to any superhero comic book, made at around that time. I wish it pertained to people today, but times are a changing, so they have been changing for a while. Even if I don't like to get on board with it, but I go over the head. They have a really good section on the head. The composition, so something like the composition, and a few of these chapters, it's taken me. Shit, I got this book in 1984. So, it had been out for a few years. I got this book in 84. My story with this book is let's put the cover back up for a second. So, I started to get into comic books in 84, like as I told you in my comic book video. And I had been drawing comic books prior to this by just copying comics. I would copy every drawing that I liked out of any comic. It's like, oh, that's a cool Spider-Man drawing, copy it. The way I copied it was kind of backwards. I would pencil a drawing out, like say take Spider-Man for example. I have a couple of them around here somewhere, but I would draw Spider-Man in one of his crazy poses or whatever. This is pre-McFarlane, so his poses weren't super exaggerated, but I draw Spider-Man in a very similar pose like the one you see there, and with pencil, and I would draw it kind of a light pencil, and then I would take markers like Crayola markers or whatever. I didn't even have Crayola. I had like cheap markers. You'd get, you'd probably find it like Five Below now or dollar store, but back then, you could find them at Kmart. I'd go through and my criteria for a good marker set was how good the flesh color is. Because, you wanted that flesh color to draw your skin, Caucasian skin specifically. It's like how good is the flesh color? If the flesh color is good, it's a 99.9% chance that the rest of the marker set's going to be good. And like I said, most of them were water-based. They're not permanent. So the way I drew, it didn't really matter. So I would pencil, like say, Spider-Man out lightly. I wouldn't put any of his webbing on. I wouldn't put a lot of the heavy blacks, into his the blue section. And then of course when I was doing the black Spider-Man quite heavily, most of his design has the heavy blacks in that. I would just draw the simple outline and pose how I wanted it, and I'd either copy it off of another drawing of Spider-Man already, or I'd kind of think up my own too. And then I would go right to it with the lightest color first. So let's say I'd go, does he have white? Yes, that's the paper. Does he have yellow? No. Okay, we don't have to do yellow. And I would go down from lightest color, which meaning the color that would bleed the most if you were to color it over a darker color, right? I'd go with whatever the light, and then I just developed this technique just intuitively. I think I got it more from coloring books, because I started using markers on coloring books. And I start, you go from yellow, and then I'd go to like a lighter or darker yellow. I'd eventually get to red, and when I get to red, it's like he's red and blue. That's it, outside of the black and white. So I'll start doing the red, and I would color in the red, and then once that's done, I would color in the blue. Then I could faintly still see my pencils underneath, but then I would take a black felt tip pen that Flair made a good one at one time, with like a 99-cent pen that would bleed like you wouldn't believe, and it was not archival, trust me. However, it was thin enough to give you a nice steady line, no line quality at all, but it would give you a nice steady line, and they didn't wear up very fast, and they were comfortable in the hand too. They were a smaller pen, because I was a younger kid at the time. So I would draw that. I would draw out, I would draw the black over the colors, and that's how I would draw. And that's how I drew pretty much from the time I started drawing, when I started drawing with color, up until I learned how to actually draw for real. So let's get into this. I'm dragging it up. So anyways, preface by Stanley, Excelsior, or whatever, blah, blah, blah. Again, I love penciled artwork like this. I love seeing true masters pencils before I like seeing the inks. I love seeing it. It's just amazing, especially when they use like the sides of the pencil and stuff. I just love seeing pencil artwork. It's got something that just grabs me, and I love seeing it. And obviously, it's not well finished. It's okay in this book because it's contextual, but outside of that, obviously nobody draws. Nobody's turning the finished work like this, unless it's a pencil sketch specifically, and that's more fine art. But so he goes to the tricks of the trade. Okay, right off the bat, when I saw this, I was also, we had an art class in 6th grade, and my 6th grade teacher's class with my 6th grade art teacher, who would come like once a week. And I know he kind of talked about these, but when I first got a hold of this stuff is when I took drawing, or it's called just creative art, first semester in 7th grade at junior high, with that teacher. Had it first hour too, first semester, and he wanted us to draw with, or ink things with a brush, a coke pen, or even a calligraphy pen. And I hated it. I could not stand it. It was so unruly. Because I get nervous about it, and I'd get all kind of spazzy when I drew, and when I did that, I would just lose all the ink out of it all over the drawing and destroy the drawing. So I really hated this. And using the brush, I didn't understand at the time, and I didn't understand for quite a while what line quality meant. And I always hear art teachers and professionals talk about the line quality, and I didn't understand what they meant. And even when I read this book does not do a good job of explaining that. It sort of does in the inking section, but it assumes that you already know what it is. I said I don't want to turn this into a how to draw video, but yeah. So they went through all the different stuff. A lot of it's drafting equipment. The whole pushing push pins into a wood board through the paper was just like, why don't you just use tape, like masking tape? Was when I took like drafting class in junior high, we used masking tape. It doesn't damage the paper, and you can redo it back and forth, but they're all about putting the push pin in there. And the other thing is with the drafting tape down, because it's drafting tape, which is essentially just masking tape, you could slide your T-square or put your triangles and stuff on there, and you didn't have to worry about running into the pins. I thought that was weird. Glass jar of water, again, not safe thing to have around paper. I think they show in his little drawing, he's got it on this little desk next to it, to keep all this stuff away from his paper, which is how you're supposed to do it. They have the drawing board. When I took drawing class, we all had drawing boards the teacher gave us that we kept in a cabinet. We didn't tack anything down either. He had a big roll of scotch tape, or a masking tape. We just masking taped down. Same thing with drafting class, masking tape. T-square here, a ruler, or as people call it, a scale, because most draftsmen, when you say hand me the ruler, and says there's no dictators in this business, meaning they don't call it a ruler. An ink compass. Oh my God! Just getting to use a regular pencil compass is nerve-wracking enough. You're gonna throw ink in there? Ink you got to dip? Yeah, I've never in my life used an ink compass, and I luckily never have to again. Hopefully, a rag, stuff like that. Okay, so now he gets into the nuts and bolts of a comic, like what actually it means. Like this is an indicia, down here. This is a credits balloon. These are caption balloons. I really need to give this page to a lot of my clients, because when they write me scripts, they call these various things that have been industry standards for years, they call them a dozen different things, and sometimes it's just like, what? So I'd like some more standardization with the terms, like a gutter. Everybody should know what a gutter means. A gutter is in between two panels. A panel. It's not a frame. It's not a picture. I know some of my clients are, not English is not their first language, so they're either trying to translate for me, or that's what they call it in their language. Different things like here, open letters. So, word balloons, captions, thought balloons. They kind of go over this whole thing here. And then he mentions camera angles. Again, I need to give a primer to my clients on how to write scripts based on what you're going to actually see, because comic books is it's a visual medium. Even though you write scripts and you write dialogue, it's still a visual medium. You got to know pretty much a little bit of film. I mean, that's probably the easiest way to figure it out. I mean, some stuff just seems self-explanatory to me. I am not a good teacher. Trust me. I'll tell you a bunch of stories why I am a terrible teacher. And this is why I don't do tutorials, because I cannot explain things very well. I could very articulate with certain things, but I also, like this book, just assume people know what I'm talking about when I say stuff. So, like close-ups, pretty self-explanatory. It's a close-up of the heads. Like here's the FF's head, Mr. Fantastic, Sue, and Ben. And then, and also, it doesn't really talk about so much, but, leaving room for dialogue above that type of thing. A medium shot, which is pretty much a head to toe. Sometimes it's cut off at the calves. There's also people say you should never cut up off the calves, but, look at any magazine cover or any pinup. I mean, every, figure on any of those pages are cut right off the thighs. You're only seeing from the thighs up for the most part. That's a medium shot. You get a long shot, it's not just a gambling term. This is a long shot. You pull the camera way back. Most of the time they're panoramic, or panoramic. Sometimes they're called cinemascope, anamorphic. They have different terms for different ratios, but just by and large, it's a panoramic shot. Because widescreen isn't even as narrow. Widescreen would be more like two of these together would be widescreen. Here's a vertical panel, worm's eye view. So let's say you're a worm. You can just call it a low angle too. But looking up, this always gives the character a sense of majesty or heroicism. It usually spotlights or showcases something specific you want the reader to see. You've got a bird's eye view. You're a bird. You look down, right? You've got silhouettes. Again, a lot of this stuff modern comic book artists don't adhere to, and it drives me insane. I see some good stuff, but a lot of times it's so scatterbrained and so like they've never studied comic books in their entire life. Chapter 2 goes into making objects real. That's where you get into like the nuts and bolts of drawing, making things 3D. So going from a circle, then take a square, and then you want to make it a cube, you want to make a cylinder, excuse me, and then how it relates to different items, like console television, like anybody has one of those anymore. But other stuff, books, chairs. You have other things. I mean, even the human head is a ball. Some people say it's an oval. It is. It's an oval and a ball together. How to break down stuff. When I first got this book, I thought it was like, oh, this is how you draw a gun. This is a step-by-step on how to draw a gun. That's not what the emphasis of this chapter was, and that's what I thought it was. So that's why it didn't make a lot of sense to me. And again, my reading skills are so terrible. My comprehension skills are so terrible. I could read those bits, those captions there all day, and it didn't make sense in my head. call it a learning deficiency, whatever you want to call it, but I had trouble reading. You've got, how to draw planes, just a cylinder, blah, blah, blah. And then he breaks it down into this stuff. I don't do this, and I never really did. I guess I kind of sort of did once in a while, but I never got this methodical with making cylinders and basically primitive shapes to form a figure. I did kind of a sort of what an art teacher that I had was trying to drive home with me, that I was kind of fighting him on, because I didn't understand exactly how to do it, but I had a sort of an idea. So I had my way of doing it, and of course when I had my way and the teacher had his way, which is technically the right way, boom, we butt heads. I'm a very stubborn person. Shading, how everything is just gives you little snippets of things, but because you're seeing the Marvel characters and you're seeing this like how to approach, it helps. It helped me as a kid. It kept me very glued to it. The power of perspective. I had in elementary school they taught us about perspective. I kind of understood it. I definitely understood 1 and 2 point perspective pretty well. Going into 7th grade, that first hour art class, we did a couple of perspective projects, and I did fine. And what he didn't tell us, and not a lot of, you're not going to learn this much in high school or junior high art class. You might not even learn it in college unless you're specifically taking a class on how to draw comics, which, could you imagine if that was around when I was a kid? And that stuff's for lucky young people, and then yet they still can't draw comics very well. Whatever, I digress. It's 3 point perspective, looking up at a tall building, looking down at a tall building. I still have trouble with this today. I understand the principles behind it. I understand basic. Like if I was to draw this, I'd be fine. If I draw this, I'd be fine. If you get anything more complicated than drawing like buildings at worm and bird's eye views, my 3 point perspective skills are pretty bad. I can usually fake it. You fake it till you make it, So that's what I do. The 1 point perspective in a room, pretty basic. 2 point perspective, bird's eye in a room, living room or whatever this is, waiting room. I said I'm not going to read everything for you. They talk about how to do, wheels, stuff like that. And a lot of the stuff old school comic book artists do. I've seen original pencils of John Byrne. He grids everything. I don't do that. I make a grid if I need it, but other than that, I usually eyeball everything. And then, more perspective. So then we get into the figure, his cap right there, really good drawing cap. Great drawing of Reed Richards. And this basically explains, this is, like I said, this isn't going to be a how to draw comics or how to draw video. I'm just showing you just the stuff why this book was so useful and really spoke to me as a kid. How to draw a woman, as far as the differences. There's Sue. I love this art. I love this art. There's Cap. Basically his whole thing about this was, this is an idealized male figure. This is a typical male figure. I always assumed it was, this is an adult, this is a teenager, but that's not what they mean in this. And again, I think this whole realism thing with modern comics are, so, the average person looks like this, so we need to draw this, but this is a comic book about outrageous, fantastical characters. I want to see a character that's unrealistic. I want to see a character that's, looks like he's, goes to the gym every day and is pumped up on steroids. I want to see that. I don't want to see just some dude. Some average dude, too. I would like to, at least, if it's going to be a real person, at least it's an exceptional person. That's why they put good-looking people on television. They don't put ugly people on television. At least they didn't. Is because people want to see the idealized version of things. If it gives people, complexes or whatever. Every time I watch Rocky or any other movie with a bunch of dudes working out and they're giant, I get a complex. But do I let it bother me? No, I don't want to get on a soapbox here, but I think you get my point. Doctor Doom, great big drawing, and they're trying to tell like, oh, this is good, but this is better. This is the Marvel way. It just means dynamic. It means the dynamic way. You're making things dynamic. Thing is a terrible character to draw. He's fun, but you want to rip your hair out. Try drawing the Thing. This is fine in this pose here. Try to draw the Thing doing anything. It's something. All right. Kingpin. They're basically telling like, if you want a character big and bulky that looks massive, use this type of pattern. People probably know they've heard of this pattern before. Chapter 5. Let's see. Drawing the figure. This is basically, so this is gesture drawing. You want to draw a gesture of a person doing something. They talk about drawing through. That's more of a gesture here. So this first drawing of Thor here is perfect. That's a gesture drawing. Just kind of scribbles, laying out the proportions. Hey, the arm's too long. Let's shrink it in a little bit. Hey, the head's too big. Let's bring the head down a little bit. Hey, let's try to work on some foreshortening, laying it down in here, blah, blah, blah. Hey, let's refine the sketch a little bit more, make it look more like Thor. And then, boom, we get this, right? Again, when I was used to drawing before, somewhere in between this with less sketchiness is how I would draw, and then I would just go right to color. But I think this is Sif. I believe this is Sif, or Sif, or however you say your name, from Thor. I was great drawing. I really love the women's hairstyles from like the older time periods, and I love the way they draw them. That type of thing. Great drawing of Submariner. Awesome drawing of Submariner. Probably one of the best ones I've ever seen. Most of these are John Buscema. I mean, you can draw a person with a lot of muscles like this, or you can draw them just bulky. There's a whole difference between drawing like a big hand. Like this guy's got a big hand. It's not like super crazy looking and gnarled, or this guy's got a big chest and big arms, and you don't have to draw every rippling muscle and make him look like, like I said, he's cut. Back then, I mean, I guess this goes for like old school wrestlers. I'm a big guy, a big guy. John Buscema was a big guy. It's like he's thick. I've got big parts, so it gives you weight. It realizes, well, that person's probably 300 pounds, he's thick, he's big. He might not necessarily be fat. He could be fat, in this type, or, large stomach, but I mean, he could just be thick and big. And I like that. That's the weight. I mean, if you ever shake the hands of like a really big guy who's not cut, and he's not fat either. He's not, not this giant ball of a guy, but he's just a big guy. Like a 6'2", 6'3" man who's just a big guy in okay shape. If you shake his hand, you just feel the weight in his hand. I mean, he just looks like he has weight to them. And that's, what they used to do. There was a whole 90s period that made just insano-looking characters. Now, that I think taking the fantasy, exaggerated human is a little too crazy in that. Talking about motion, follow-through, this is the best for these two type. Wind up for a punch and then a, punch, throwing a punch. These are the best two to use. Anything in between is just kind of weak sauce. Gestures. Again, very important chapter of the book. One I sort of got, but I didn't understand all of the complexities, and it's taken me years to understand it. Drawing people in crazy positions, like getting thrown through the air and having it look right, that's very hard to draw. And I still mess it up from time to time. That type of thing. This is going through some follow-through from an original gesture to a finished pencil. Here's Spidey doing it. I always loved this drawing of Spidey. I loved all this detailing in here using the pencil, and not all of that always translates well to the inks. Some inkers can destroy a great penciler. If you ever look at like Gene Colan's original pencils and then see like Vince, what the heck was his name? His name totally escaped me. The inker, Italian inker, I'm going to call him Vince Coletta. Is that what it is? Yeah, it's Vinny Coletta. Yeah, Vinny Coletta. Okay, so, like Gene Colan's pencils look amazing in pencil form. Coletta comes along, just butchers them. John Buscema himself said he didn't like anybody inking his own work because they would butcher his work, and they did. I mean, there's tons of Savage Sword of Conans you can look through and see what would have been great art, but the inkers just destroyed it. So an inker can ruin good art. An inker could also take crappy art and make it great. I mean, it's just like anything. There's always the extremes. This goes into foreshortening. Where am I at? Oh, I'm at 35 minutes. I don't want to make this an hour-long video. So let's kind of bring it down here. It goes into a lot of the stuff in the figure. It goes into the head. Again, like I said, this is not a how-to draw video. Give me the villains' heads. A lot of stuff to pour through. You know, a lot of information that you can read up on and stuff. I think you can get this book at I've seen a stack of them at Five Below for $5. You know, they're whatever umpteenth printing of them, but it's cheap. You can pick these books up cheap. Goes into stuff. I love his artwork, but I totally disagree with Basim when it comes to eyes on stuff. Noses noses are fine. Lips I also have issues with. He always talks about, you know, drawing women with thin lips, and I like women with thick lips, both lips. So and he says don't do that. I like that. Don't draw, you know, do not learn how to draw a mouth, or sorry, do learn how to draw a mouth pleasing shape. Don't draw a bow tie or like a heart. But I make my women with real curvy lips. Guys, pretty much I give them the standard dude lip. Drawing heads from different angles, not easy to do. Examples of all that. Composition, now this is one area I kind of want to touch on. Give me a couple of minutes. I still have trouble understanding this chapter, and I get the point, but sometimes I don't see it. And what they're telling is a flow of composition. You know, if you take a design class, like a college design class, if you're in art school, they probably won't teach this much in high school or junior high, but in college, especially in art school, they're going to teach composition, and there's certain things you know about. Photographers have to know this stuff too. This isn't just drawing. Photographers have to know this stuff. Cinematographers, you know, if you're doing anything film related, you got to know this stuff. And it's abstract. I mean, sometimes it's obvious. Sometimes it's very hard to wrap your head around, and you know, you wouldn't believe it, but drawing a comic book panel sometimes can be really hard to do. I mean, if you want it to look good, it's really hard to do. I mean, you can just slap stuff together and call it a day, but if you want stuff to really look good, it can be hard to understand good composition. Most of the old masters that are doing this stuff, especially Buscema, they're exactly that. They're masters at it, and they did it by looking at film for the most part, film and photography. Or just from real life, but most of it you want to look film photography because the image is flattened. You know, everybody says learn to draw from real life, and I totally agree with that. Learn to draw from real life. At the same time, you might want to draw from photographs or film. You know, take your DVDs or streaming videos or whatever, and just pause them on a scene. Hopefully, the pause doesn't have anything in the way, and just take a look scene by scene. Look at screen caps. You know, you can take a DVD, or you can take a movie file, the AVI file, whatever. Throw it through I can't remember. It's totally blanking. VCI application, and you can pull out. You can do screen caps every second. You can pull out every second. You know, or every more than that. I don't think you can pull all 60 frames per second, 60 frames per second, but you can pull every scene, and it takes up a lot of memory, but you can make catalogs of screenshots from things and just study them, especially good films, you know, films that are noteworthy for their cinematography. How to construct a page. I personally use this. So there's different constructions of pages. I use the 6-frame panel system. So I don't always do 6 frames just like this. I have, and I do them. I mean, most of the masters and those older guys would do these. I try to vary them up a little bit. I don't like to put 6 frames on a page with this unless it's like exactly this. I'm trying to show action or a lot of things happening at once. I like to do at least 1 or 2 panoramic shots. It doesn't have to be a long shot specifically, but I want a wide angle in one of these, whether it's on top, whether it's in the middle, whether it's here. Sometimes I like doing a tall panel over here. So putting 6 panels on every page it's too dense, It looks too repetitive. You know, if you every other page or maybe every 3 pages you throw in a 6-panel page like this, and maybe you might want to, you know, vary your panels there so they're not all squares. So maybe there's some of them rectangle, which gives you a little bit more room here. It depends on the script. Again, a good writer of a script knows this stuff, and most of them don't. Most script writers who can't draw have no idea how to write scripts correctly. I mean, you even take Alan Moore, or, you know, people they consider great. You know, Frank Miller can write great comic book scripts because he's an artist. But you take an average comic book writer who's like, I can't even draw a stick figure. Well, then you can't write comic books. Because if you don't know how to draw at least basic stuff or understand the stuff, your comics are going to suck. I mean, bottom line, they're going to suck. You have to know how to compose a panel to write a panel description. You know, you can't just say, oh, well, this guy's there, and this guy's there, and that guy's there, and they're in a room, and they all look tired. Well, yeah, but who are you talking? And then they go, hey, we got 5 people on a panel, then another 5 people, another 5 people, another 5 people. It's like, I'm not putting 5 people in every panel, and everybody says something. You know, there's, like I said, there's lots of rules or, you know, standards on how to write, you know, or what needs to go in a panel. I try not to do more than 2 people in a panel unless there's a third person. The third person, like Vision here, is a react. You know, he's on the side. You know, or if I am going to put the whole cast, I'm going to make a bigger panel. I might even just do a whole splash page. You know, again, just examples. They're talking about this is okay and this is the Marvel way. So again, it just means dynamicism. Sorry. Again, that's what these examples. These chapters are pretty self-explanatory. They talk about covers. This is one thing I think is totally lost, and not just on comic books, but on book covers. It's lost on movie posters, especially. Is nobody knows how to construct a good cover anymore. Everybody does the exact same thing. It's a stack of heads. It's a stack of everybody in this movie, a stack of everybody in this comic, and they're all jumping at you. I mean, that works once in a while, like Secret Wars #1, perfect example. But not every single cover of every single comic book has to have the entire cast of the comic book on the cover coming at you or just standing there, right? They need to, you know, you need to think about your cover. You need to make it dynamic. And I see a lot of people who don't do that. I think, you know, it seems like yes, it seems like somebody just starts drawing a cover and they never, you know, never give it a shot and see if they can try it again from a different angle. I mean, I don't spend a great deal of time, but I thumbnail, even though I work 100% digital, which I can thumbnail digitally, and I just quickly just give me is that gonna look good? No. Is that gonna no? Is that gonna no? Is that okay? That one looks good. You know, I don't take a lot of time to do it, but I do it. Laying everything out, going from this is where it really gets into the inking. Again, I think that most modern comic book inkers, if there even is such thing, most of the comic book artists now ink their own work. They need to read this chapter on how to ink things. It is, or a better book than this, but definitely read a book on inking, over inking, under inking. Yeah. Balancing your blacks. That's an art all into itself, is balancing your blacks. So it goes into all this stuff. It gives you a bibliography. You know, they mentioned, I think they mentioned Bernie Hogarth's, Drawing the Human Head. Hogarth was a classic comic book artist, and he did a bunch of dynamic anatomy. There's a lot of books that they reference here, which I've checked out. I don't own it. I think I've owned a couple of Bernie Hogarth books in my time. But the other ones, at least I just made some Xerox copies if I got a hold of the book. They talk about drawing animals, books like that, acknowledgments, here pencilers, Neil Adams has work in here. A lot of these characters, Kirby, Gene Colan. I guess Byrne wasn't in here. This is 78. Oh, Byrne was just getting into, he's probably just starting out then, okay. In the back cover. So there it is, 44 minutes long. That is How to Draw Comics the Marvel Way. It's one of my Bibles. I constantly looking through it, constantly learning some stuff's fine. All of a sudden just clicking, or just inspires me, whatever. But like I said, it does have a lot of shortcomings. It's not a great book. It's a good book to me. I love it, but it's not a great book. So you got to kind of have to take this book as a grain of salt too. But a lot of the basic stuff, if you know nothing about it, this is a good place to start. Better book, get to it later. But let's wrap this up because, like I said, I didn't want this to go for an hour. So, all right. I don't know what I'm going to mention tomorrow. I'm going to try to stagger my videos. Oh, by the way, if I do one on art books today, I might do one on comic books tomorrow. If I do one on comic books tomorrow, I'm going to try to do one on action figures, vintage or modern. I eventually started this out as an action figure book, but I can see it's morphing into more just a collection of just things that I just kind of, can talk about. So, I will catch you guys tomorrow. Until then, I'm going to get back to doing something here. All right. Take it easy. Bye-bye.